You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high. A lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khateeb. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Now, many of us know about the power of music. I mean, it's something that's has a significant part of our daily lives, but the science behind it, and more specifically, how it can improve outcomes in health, whether it's reduction of stress, pain management, or others, is still quite new. And that's why I wanted to have Walter Werzowa onto the show. Walter has over 30 years of experience in the music industry. He's very passionate and a visionary leader in audio branding and music AI. And so from that, he's created and produced award-winning music and sound design for global brands such as Intel, Disney, BMG, and Chrysler, and also for a variety of films, commercials, and trailers. In this episode, though, we dive into the science and medicine behind music as therapy, and we specifically talk about his company, HealthTunes, which you can learn more by going to healthtunes.org. to learn more. It's a great episode, and I think it's quite interesting because I think there's going to be a variety of products and platforms like this where you use a variety of approaches to healing in the hospital setting. That being said, if you're a CEO or founder and you think you want to be on the show, check the show notes below. We have a form down there, submit so you can come on. And we all know how difficult it is to gain traction and, more importantly, grow awareness of your product and company, not only for investors, but early adopters. This is where my company, Khateeb & Co. helps. We work with a variety of different medtech startups to help them gain that traction using social media and, more importantly, build a sales pipeline for you. So if that fits you, if you want to see if we can help you, go ahead and go to my website, khateebandco.com to learn more. And now let's get on to our episode. Enjoy. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. And I'm joined by a guest through a mutual friend that you've seen on the show, Howard Rose, who's really a big pioneer in the AR, VR space in medicine. And Howard sent me this message and told me about our guest today, who's Walter Werzowa, who's the founder of HealthTunes, and how I should definitely have him on. Howard and I talked a lot about the idea of using music and its healing properties in medicine. And so Walter is an expert in that, specifically in terms of how do we apply AI music for health. So Walter, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Great, Omar. It's so good to be speaking with you, and I'm looking forward to the next hour with you.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, what better a place for somebody who's using AI and music in therapy to be than Vienna? So it fits perfectly. So maybe give us a little bit of an intro on your background before we talk about the topic today.
So I was born into a family of doctors, like even the cousins and brothers and uncles, everybody seems to be a doctor but me. I escaped into music early on, loved playing in bands and classic music. And eventually Austria got really small. I escaped to Los Angeles, postgraduate USC, and got stuck there. And it's just, what could be better than being stuck in Hollywood? And I had the chance to work with Spielberg and Wim Wenders and on. And when my son was 5 years old, he had a very rare illness. It's called leg patesse. It's something where the femur falls apart and regrows. It's a very painful process and could be 3, 4, or 5 years. And my wife was amazing. She opted into something different at the time: acupuncture, sound healing, and a very strict diet. A year later, he was running, and it was like a miraculously fast recovery. And UCLA asked us, "What did you guys do?" A year later, him running, they haven't seen that. I realized that sound and music was a huge part of his healing. And I got really lucky in my life, and so I thought it's time to give back, and I founded HealthTunes.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So what did you do during that period to heal your son?
We had very specific sound and music regimes, so to say, like at certain times, to expose him to very specific frequency ranges to music. And I had no clue in the beginning why and what. we did it, and we luckily did it the right way, and we learned a lot this way. And sound and music has so many properties. It's from entrainment to the easy parts, dopamine when you like the music, and a respiratory entrainment. So it's definitely a better, deeper breathing because we automatically respond to rhythm and music. And it really worked out.
That's fantastic. And I think every great medtech story, or at least founder story, starts with something personal that sort of inspires you to go on the journey of starting a medtech company and everything, which is not easy. And so tell us a little bit about like HealthTunes in terms of where you're at funding wise and what exactly is it that HealthTunes does?
HealthTunes started also at the time I started psychology, and it became a project. So that infused a lot of scientific research and being buttoned up because there's so many music helpers out there, and they might or might not be incredible, but they are a little bit confusing or anecdotal. And from the beginning on, I realized I want everything evidence-based, and any user, any person dialing in could look into a database why what is helping. And so what we're doing is we stream music medicine. And again, like looking at the little ones, when your 2-year-old has a cough and wouldn't like the cough syrup, you dilute it. So we are using a lot of binaural beats, auditory beat stimulation. And auditory beat stimulation doesn't sound great to our ears. So some of the therapies, we basically add music you like to listen to and pack the binaural beats in. And we have a patent for that, how we mix them dynamically so that you can get exposed to binaural beats and the music you like on top of it.
Yeah, and that's definitely a topic, like an area that I know of. One of the more popular ones that I'm familiar with is brain.fm, which essentially has a variety of binaural beats for sleep and focus and everything. What is it about binaural beats that has a sort of impact on the brain and the body?
Frequency entrains our brain waves. It's like when we listen to music, it's not just the binaural beats, but the binaural beats are precision based. I could deliver a delta brainwave and help you to calm down and get into a sleep state. And so any of those very low frequencies help us with certain states. We can reduce pain perception, we can reduce anxiety, and we can stimulate hormone productions this way. There is now the research that so many of us don't know why we like to listen to melancholic music when we're down. That seems odd. You would think if you have no energy and you come home and your boss was yelling at you and it was just one of those bad days, you most likely listen to melancholic music, or most of the people. And we learned now when we're doing this, our brain produces prolactin. And prolactin is a hormone that helps us to shift perspective. Mothers during birthing produce a ton of prolactin, and it helps mothers to see that often very painful moment from a different angle a couple of days later and reaffirm the perspective to what had happened. And similar with music, when we listen to melancholic music, we find new solutions. We can deal with challenges in a much better way.
Interesting.
And
And one thing I've noticed is, for example, there's been talk about the healing effects of, let's say, vibrations. I think Tesla even had some kind of patents around this. And so we see this with monks who use the vibration bowls and everything. The other idea is supposedly with bees. A lot of the beekeepers have like very good longevity, and there's a big focus on the vibration that bees give off and that frequency. Is that similar to what we're seeing here with music?
it's all related. And I think with quantum physics and mechanics, we know it's like the frequency. There's in the smallest details, it's all frequency and entrainment. And we know that the Schumann resonance, there are those 4 frequency bands, which we consistently listen to when we walk on Earth. It's really low frequency spectrum, so we don't hear it, but we feel them. If we're not exposed to them, we have psychological and physical ailments. So if an astronaut is in outer space, they pump those frequencies into that space capsule to keep the astronauts healthy. And those frequency bands are so needed. And we research more and more what happens. If you think our heartbeat is a frequency machine in a sense as well. We have in sleep the REM phases where we go through many frequency bands rapidly. And then we know in epilepsy, we have chaotic brain waves. And here there's a very recent study of Ivan Rector. He's at the university and he's a neuroscience and he's a doctor. He researched that this specific piece of Mozart, it's Hörspielverzeichnis 4, it's a sonata for two pianos, reduces seizures by 70%, up to 70%. And there are a lot of drug-resistant epileptic patients. And for them, that's just incredible that with music, you can help them. And so our next big aspiration here is to find out why is that music helping. Nobody really knows. We know that it helps, but not why. I have my theories. I think it's somewhere with the overtone structures and how to entrain the brain waves and regulate them. But the next step will be using AI to compose more music which matches the efficacy of Mozart and give that to the world. Because right now, the good thing is, even if you don't like Mozart, it works. There is a lot of music that preference is important, where if you don't like the music, it doesn't help you as much. That is why in HealthTunes, we have a genre button. And let's say if you love EDM music, you will get your therapy in EDM. Could be jazz or ambient music, you name it, and you will find the style, the genre of music, which is of your liking and your preference.
That's fascinating. And I'm wondering also, and I think this is such a great time for a founder like you, with given the access to AI to like further optimize this. Do you think, so for me, I'm very interested in psychology and the way the human mind and perception affects the world. And so if you look at something like anxiety, I've noticed with myself that so much of your world is affected through perception, right? And so sometimes if you have a bad event that happens to you, the way you perceive it can make it worse. You get more stressed out, more anxious. But then just flipping a different switch in your mind immediately changes everything. Nothing changed except the perception in your mind. Do you feel like music is essentially that stimulus where essentially all the answers and solutions for a lot of these things, depression, anxiety, everything, already exist within the mind? The idea is, how do we access that switch and turn it on? Is that the way to look at it?
Yes, it can be that. It is that partner, that other person which speaks directly to you. We have done studies where we immediately see that our physiology is changing and adapting to the music, to the rhythm of whatever you're listening to. We had the Viennese Philharmonic censored up, and we realized immediately that when they play music that their breathing, their respiratory functions align, and with that, the heart rate. And of course, the movement, because they're playing the same music, but even the timpani player in the back who didn't play at the moment had the same entrainment. And then we went one step further and we gave the audience the sensors and realized that the whole room became more or less one, like oneness. In that sense, that whole rhythm transfers to anybody. And I do believe that is a huge part of the healing power, the efficacy of music, that you feel together, that you feel not lonely anymore. And we are very successful during COVID and after COVID. People were alone, and the anxiety because of that was increasing. And with music, that shifts immediately. And music is a ritual which makes us feel we are together with other people. And it was so beautiful to see last year, September, Secretary of State Blinken started a new initiative, the Music Diplomacy Initiative, he said and started it that during peace negotiations, music is used worldwide. Can you believe the White House is finally that far to realize that music is helping in peace negotiations? That is an incredible start, and Quincy Jones is leading that.
That's fantastic. And it's interesting because we see this in the world of persuasion, the famous study by Dr. Cialdini, which is there's a wine store that they were trying to sell more German wine and they couldn't. If you think about wine, no offense to my German listeners, but when you think of wine, you think of Italy, France, California. There's a whole list before you get to German. And so they played German music and their German wines saw sales shot up.
Yeah.
For HealthTunes, and by the way, I forgot to mention to our audience, so HealthTunes is available right now. You can go and check them out at healthtunes.org, but you have pricing on there, which you can subscribe for just $4.99 a month or $49 for the year. What's the difference between, let's say, a HealthTunes versus some of these other music-based apps that are focused on, let's say, sleep and focus and everything? Is HealthTunes more for more serious ailments like anxiety and depression? Like, how, if you can walk us through, if I subscribe to HealthTunes now, what does that process look like and how do I use it as a user?
We try to make it as simple and 2 or 3 click as it gets. I run a music business, and I built a music library which was acquired by BMG. It had 26,000 tracks, so I'm quite well versed in the whole legal side and asset management of music, and that really was helpful to create and make HealthTunes a powerful player. How to negotiate with the rights holders. So we do have music from the most famous Billboard charts and we do pay the rights holders. And I was able to negotiate fees which are fair to the rights holders and good for the patients if they want to listen to it. So if you want to listen to a famous track, you probably find it in HealthTunes with the medicinal part you need. And that's a big difference.
Got it. What have been the most common applications for HealthTunes like that you're seeing, at least on the patient side? Is it mainly people who have anxiety, depression? Like, what's sort of the bread and butter case?
Definitely pain, sleep, anxiety, huge ones. And it seems we are getting deeper and deeper into the epilepsy seizure world. And it fascinates me that something so specific can be addressed with music, and that nobody really knows why. And we would like to find out what happens and how can we make it work, that no matter what style of music you like, that you find what you need, or if you have somebody in your family with epilepsy, that you can offer music that makes an instant change. But I loved what you just said about our perception. And I think Viktor Frankl amazingly said it's in that split second, something happens to us and how we react. We have that freedom to decide how I want to react to this. It's my choice. I can be mad at you, or I can be in equanimity, or fight back. Or it's just my choice. And I think we can train us to make better choices. And especially with our families and kids, we can help them not to go into that fight state right away. There might be moments where you should do it. Luckily, we don't have those saber-toothed tigers behind us anymore. But we can react differently. We have choices.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that's exactly what I had in mind, which is Viktor Frankl's man's search for meaning, right?
Yes.
And I think that it's important to have these technologies today because we're living in a modern age where we have devices, social media, and even the electricity. The world has been electrified in a different way today than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And so having modern tools to help us guide and navigate through these worlds is very important, which is why I was very excited to talk to you specifically about music. You mentioned before coming on the show that you're currently also you're using AI. And I think you had mentioned there's some certain pieces on Mozart and Beethoven that you're working on. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, how do you train AI to compose these things?
Yeah, I had the chance to take a big leap in that 3 years ago. I got this call. It was the middle of the day. Matthias Röder, he is a Harvard PhD. He called me saying, "Hey, Walter, would you like to compose a symphony with Beethoven?" And you can imagine when you get this call out of the blue, I was joking back and I said, "Yeah, I want to write with the Beatles and Rolling Stones." And he said, "No, concentrate. We want to write a symphony and I want you to write the symphony with Beethoven." So I knew he was serious at this point, and of course I said yes, realizing that there was an incredible team available with Elgamal, Rutgers University, and we had a PhD from Cornell, and it was just a power team. And becoming part of those incredible scientists taught me a different way of life, of creativity. And why I'm saying this, because when I met Ahmed Elgamal for the first time, and it was clear Beethoven left the very short sketches for his 10th symphony. He wanted to write it, but he passed away before he really started it. It was very little music. Some of those are like 2 bars or so, and one full movement in a symphony has 13,000 note heads or so. There's a big shift between those numbers. And I studied music, and I brought my music theory books to Ahmed Elgamal and said, "So here are the books, and you have to put them into your AI so the AI is good." And he laughed at me. At first I thought, oh my God, he's complacent. And explained to me, no way, the AI should not learn the academics of music. And first I thought, is he joking? And he said something incredible. He said he wants that the AI bucket, the training material, is everything Beethoven wrote and influenced him. It doesn't matter if there is a so-called academic mistake or not. It is his work. And when we analyze Beethoven and we forget about this, some of my university professors would scratch parts out of it because there are academic and you could say mistakes or things you shouldn't do, but that makes it genius. And so if you would teach the AI only by the book, pun intended, it would feel like a young student, a young, perfect student who writes music, and not like this genius Beethoven who wrote music the way he felt it, based on academics. And this was such an incredible awareness and change in life, and allowing mistakes and being more open and seeing that genius is not perfection. Genius is something very different. So we want to give this AI to the world to have more fun in being creative. There are so many kids there. Somebody shouted at them when they were singing, "Wow, you have an awful voice," and they never sing again, and they don't dare to sing anymore. And or write poetry or paint or compose. And I think that this can help them to find their inner creativity again, because our kids are 24/7 creative. When they sleep, they're creative. When they eat, they're creative. And then the next 20 years, something happens. And many of us are not creative anymore after 20 years. And there's something wrong about this. The number is, I think, less than 3% of mankind lives off of creativity. And that's a very low number. And we should and can help that.
That's fascinating. And it makes hearing you say that, it reminds me of what Picasso once said. I think he said something like that. It took him a lifetime to learn how to paint like Raphael, or it took him 4 years to learn how to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child. Do you feel like over time, that's what happens to creativity, is that as an adult, we start imposing all these rules and ways we think the world works. And so that creativity ends up getting blocked out and we end up becoming more rigid?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm teaching at the university in Vienna, and my first question to those are master students who compose for the whole life and 3 years into composition. I asked them, what is music? And everybody starts smiling and think, oh, I have the answer. So far, no one could give me on the spot a great answer. Not describing the effects what music does to you, but what is music. And so I researched and found Edgar Varese talked about it and said music is organized sound, which is, I think, incredible. And that opens doors to AI. And to me, there's just one word missing. It's intentional organized sound, because when you compose, there's an intention behind it. So that would be my amended statement for it. And then I'll ask them, what is creativity? And what you just shared about Picasso, I think in my mind, and learning it through this Beethoven AI project, it's choice. Because it was clear Beethoven was wandering through the Viennese vineyards and composing in his mind. And he had the sketchbook on him. And whenever he had a melody he thought of worthy, he would put it in his sketchbook, not to forget it. And then later on, a day later, 2 weeks later, he would find those sketches and bring them into a symphony or a sonata or whatever. So there's always a form of choice. He had many melodies in his head. Some of them are in the book and he wouldn't develop. So it is all about seeing this and saying, this is worthy to be my next symphony. And I think Picasso as well. And I have to admit, I think Picasso is incredible. He was one of those quantum leap artists like Schoenberg. But he was incredibly ballsy, and to have something so different, to stand behind it, to be so convinced and giving this to the world, because this can go wrong. You could say this is so different that it's not okay and you're afraid of it. And maybe if he wasn't so convinced about his style, you wouldn't know about him. So it's choice and being bold. And Ahmed Algamar has this beautiful TED talk about what makes a masterpiece. And he says, as a mathematician, it needs to be original, of course, but many things are in the moment original. But then it's all about time. If that work influences something else and that influences something else, and you find this mathematical lines, like it's like almost like a flow chart through time, that those masterpieces influence incredible. If you see Mona Lisa and what was influenced by that, it looks like a fan and has tons and tons of connections. And I like that simple mathematical approach.
No, I think that's fascinating to say, and I think there's something to be said about that in terms of how we go about solving problems, in terms of the originality and how we allow like creativity to express itself. Going back to how do you foresee the application of medicine in the modern age, let's say in a hospital or clinic? You mentioned pain is a good example of a use case that patients use music for. Maybe can you walk us through that application and what would it look like? I guess if your vision was, fully realized, let's say here in the US, what would you see in a hospital or in a clinic?
Yeah, there's basically two types of pain: the chronic pain and acute pain. Acute or traumatic, it's like after an accident, it would be a sudden challenge with it, and you are probably flooded with a ton of information at the moment. And we and also the hospitals work differently in that case than if it's chronic pain, which might be caused by inflammation. And if you know that, we can hone into inflammation and help the nervous system and the vagus nerve to calm down and help in that way. I really think that hospitals are so necessary, and of course we need them. I just wish that the whole soundscape in hospitals would be more conducive for healing. It, for obvious reasons, it is scary to live in there, and I've been many times in hospitals with patients, and for me, just walking in there for a little time, it is scary. It's this cold acoustic which you need. It's just the floors are laid out in a way that you can easily clean them and there are no obstacles. But there's so much reverberation and the high end, and it's just the acoustic is awful there. And I wish that patients could get, if you don't have any accidents around the head, like earbuds right away, or a system that they can live in a nicer sonic environment. And right now, I don't know if you heard about it, Samsung and Google is coming up with a new spatial system. It's open source, and I hope this will be cost effective, that anybody, especially in hospitals, could have their own sonic space and can be in a biophilic environment. And we all see it and know it, that we heal much faster if we look into nature, or if you feel we're in nature with immersive sound. We can do a lot and help that faster recovery. And we don't have it in spatial and HealthTunes yet, but that's the next step, that we want to deliver music, sound, and especially environmental sounds in spatial environments.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think if we think about the complexity of healing, right? There's so many factors that go into it. I don't think you need a research paper or a retrospective study for somebody to understand that if you have a patient that's stressed versus somebody who's more relaxed, the one who's relaxed is going to heal much more effectively and efficiently. And if we look at the hospital, the first place that comes to mind, I think this is probably what spurred our conversation when I talked to Howard, is the critical care unit. These are the most fragile, sick patients. But when you walk in the critical care unit, it's the most chaotic. You have all kinds of devices. Each one has their own audio based alerts. There's multiple alarms going off constantly, which is disruptive to the hospital staff. But as a patient, if you're trying to rest and heal, and every minute something is pinging and vibrating or going off and everything, it's chaotic. And I think that kind of chaotic environment has an effect on introducing chaos within the body and the healing process. You mentioned a specific term. You said an ISO, a specific like a soundscape essentially for patients, essentially like to be protected from this, essentially, correct?
Personal, yeah. It would be great for them to have a personal sound, and that you can be in a biophonic environment or whatever environment you want to be in. And on top of it, the worst is for the caregivers, those nurses, those doctors, they're stressed anyway. They're saving lives. I'm so in awe what they are doing and how they are doing this. But then having this noise level and stress on top of it, that is why at WellStar we built these recovery rooms just for caregivers. And it's beautiful to see that they're using it, and it's extremely helpful that they have time to relax and get out of their burnout, anxiety, stress levels, because they will work and they are better doctors when they're relaxed.
No, 100%. And WellStar, this is the health system, correct?
Yeah, Star Health, yeah.
What are those? Can you tell us a little bit more about those recovery rooms? What do they look like, and what's the soundscape in those?
So they built Spatial, that company, built immersive sound. So it's 360-degree sound with an array of speakers where you can dive into very specific environments, like from forest to being like beaches and mountains. And it literally, you close your eyes, you are in that space because it's so well recorded and so well laid out spatially. And we are adding binaural beats to that and music. So very specific music to help the caregivers to calm down and relax, but still stay focused. And we have something very similar as well for police force, where you want them to be less aggressive but focused. So you can't give them any medication to be less aggressive because they might be less focused. Here we work with drum patterns and ask them to drum along and to become part of a team. And drumming along, even if you're not a great drummer, helps you to listen to the person next to you, to connect with the person, to be a team, and being focused. Because as a drummer, of course, you need to stay in rhythm and to stay focused, and you're getting some of your aggression out when you bang those drums.
That's fascinating. It's really interesting to hear, especially considering that these hospital environments, people spend quite a lot of time in them, whether it's the staff or the patients. And so like offering these kind of things is really interesting. I think it's one of those things where I'm sure decades from now, we'll look back and like almost laugh that we didn't have these things in there. Like when we look back 100 years ago and we're like, man, can you believe that they didn't wash their hands in the hospital?
Well, in the 70s, it's like you would lose your license in the United States if you would administer acupuncture. It's like they started this 1970 that they would allow that, and now you laugh about that. I can tell and feel the change over the years that the community is so much more open about music. And to me, the only challenge we have with music is because it's so readily available and anybody does it in their cars, in the elevators and shopping centers, that it's so obvious and you have music at all time that you don't even think about it, that music can help your healing process.
I
It's just
completely
there.
agree. I think especially in the digital age, we have to be mindful of the things that we put into our mind, just like we're very mindful today of what we put in our bodies. So that includes what are the images, videos, sounds I'm consuming on social media. The same thing with music. I tell people, I think the dumbest thing that you can do is just turn on the radio and let random music play for you, because you have no idea what's going to be played, and that's going to have an effect on you subconsciously.
Absolutely. I really believe that most of us are exposed to way too much music and that we should really calm down a little bit. And I love music. I
Really?
live for music. And here is a story because a lot of us think there's good and bad music. And here is a beautiful story it's a real hospital story. This patient, he was last days cancer. It was clear that he would pass maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe 3 days to live. He knew, and everybody in the department knew. And so he was asked, do you want to listen to specific music? And he thought about it and said, yeah. And when you have somebody in front of you being in the last hours of his life and asking at that moment, it startles you. And of course, we'll get that to you, but let me ask you why you. And he said, yes, I love AC/DC. My wife hated it. So for the last 40 or 50 years, whatever it was, I barely listened to AC/DC. Now I want to listen to it. He got the AC/DC CD and peacefully transitioned in that night, which again
Wow.
is just, and we should never say there's good music and bad music, and there's music which certain people love, some don't love, but let's not put a stamp on it.
And
I think it'd be helpful.
yeah, and I appreciate you coming on the show. But as we round out our interview, I want to ask you this, which is, you said something along the lines that like we listen to too much music too often. How do you balance that out then? Do you recommend that like a person on any given day, maybe they have some time where they don't listen to music in the car or don't listen to music in the gym? How do we start getting a better hygiene around music so that way it has a positive impact on our life?
That's a great question. So there's functional music when you work out and you want music to help you to work out better. Perfect. That's great. There's so many scenarios where I wear earbuds now with no music. If I'm in a shopping mall, it's like I just really don't want to be exposed to that music that echoes around there and the noise. And so in that sense, shopping malls become some kind of solstice to me. For me, it's quiet there with noise canceling headphones or earbuds. I think it's up to you. Cars are amazing. I think cars will be the next therapy stations where you could really have a music therapy session when they're self-driving and you are by yourself. When you drive in LA, you're only by yourself, and you could listen to sound and music to be really powerful in the moment for your health. Yeah, there are moments. In advertising, we use music so much, and my company, we've done so much of it. Audio branding, I've done that in audio branding, which was, I think, the most performed melody broadcast in the 90s. Those 3 seconds of music evoked anybody who listened to it to get the brand feeling of a company. 3 seconds of music, and changed their sales numbers and brand awareness in half a year from 26 to 86%. Just 3 seconds of music. If that can change behavior and attitude to a company this much, and we know many other samples this way, then it's so clear that music deeply affects us in our health, in our decision making, and much more.
That's fascinating. And you're talking about the 3 seconds, like at a company commercial or something, like that sound.
Yeah, that audio branding that often played at the very end of commercials or the T-Mobile or AT&T. They have those 3 second or 2.5 second melodies with an animation reflecting the company. And you can test yourself. I'm sure you have those songs you loved from early on. If you hear just half a second of a snippet in that song, the whole song is in your mind, and the whole attitude and even scent and experience and story. It's just, you don't need the whole song to live through the emotion.
Absolutely. And that's a good point, because sometimes you'll hear like a snippet of a song, you immediately, like the whole song comes in your head. As we round out, I have one last question for you. Of all the companies out there, who has the best audio brand and why?
Oh my God. So it's like we worked with so many, and Intel was the first big audio branding out there. And I think also because of that, it became the most successful one. And like that 5 or 6 theses on it. Like I'm getting every couple of years people writing about it and asking me questions, because it is and was so powerful. So it seems in terms of numbers that Intel is and was the most powerful audio branding in history. And it opened many doors for me.
Fantastic. And for those who are listening, I recommend just to Google or YouTube it, and you'll see what we're talking about. But Walter, we really appreciate you coming on the show. And just for the listeners who are listening to you, one is go check out Walter's company at HealthTunes.org. And Walter, where can people find you online?
Type in Walter Werzowa. It's a difficult name, Werzowa. Or the company is called Musikvergnügen. It's the German spelling MUSIK. Vergnügen, Vergnügen. You can abbreviate Music V. Yeah, it was great spending this hour with you. Thank you for those wonderful questions.
Absolutely. And then when I'm in Vienna, I'll be visiting you, okay?
That's a promise. Great. I'm looking forward.
I want to thank our audience for listening. If you haven't already, give the show 5 stars. Be sure to subscribe and let us know what you think about this episode. Leave a comment below on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on Spotify, you can leave a comment below as well. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who would really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.